My apologies. Okay.
That's all right.
So just
Okay.
to kind of summarize so Dwayne, one of the things I heard you say is the the goal is that the engineer goes in and creates the requisition, and then it comes across to like you and the team you're on, which is I guess for lack of a better word, is that the procurement side? Is that what you would
Hmm.
call? And then
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
and you manage the quotes, you manage getting all the data necessary for the quotes, and then work with the engineer to make an award selection, and then project manage the rest of the way through.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. As the quote comes in, everything is initiated by the engineer. So
Mhm.
the request for the different services,
Mhm.
that's initiated by the engineer, and then also when the order is when they decide on what package or what option they want, that's initiated by them also. And so we request that they put in as much information on that particular service as possible. And in fact, there are some things, if they don't put it in, we don't proceed with it.
Okay.
So there are required fields that you would need. Okay. Do
Mhm.
uh, do they tell you which vendors to go to?
Uh, in, in some cases, they do,
Okay.
um, like the one that I put in last week, they just wanted us to focus on two vendors because they had existing services. And for for the sake of saving time, they just wanted to request upgrades from those two vendors. But in most cases, we have a field of maybe about mm, 5 or 6 vendors that we'll send quotes out to try to get competitive bids from. And it depends on which part of the world it is also.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay. Sanjog,
And
you can ask.
and
Yeah.
and
Okay.
the
Thank.
and these
Wait,
and
wait.
these been and these vendors have been pre-approved
Okay.
from the higher ups.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Dwayne. Uh,
you're welcome.
yeah. Once you submit this codes after getting these details, uh, so how do you generally track or monitor these codes? So how often? I mean, do you have to go to the application to check, probably on weekly basis, or once you get response from the vendors? So how generally you track this?
Um, uh, I would, and that's something that's kind of hard to answer because it kind of depends on how quickly the engineer wants to get that quote information back. And to this point, I don't think that there is um, a not a reminder, but like an email or a note of receipt when we get those quotes in. So I do have to manually go in there to check to see if they've been answered. And in some cases, the engineer will let me know, Dwayne, we've submitted our bids. Uh, uh, so let me know if you have any questions. So it's kind
Okay.
of like
So
it's not a organized type of way that I do that. It just kind of depends on the situation.
okay, so there should be some kind of alert or notification. Currently,
That
you have to remember that
that
you
that
have submitted a quote and that needs to be tracked.
it would be good. Yeah, it would be good if there was a notice that came out to mention that, um, or even. Well, I think maybe
Okay.
an email notice may be better, but even if a notice came up when I logged into SACON that said that you know these quotes have arrived. New quotes arrived or something like that. That would be nice too.
Right. So something like your emails, which just say, okay, here are some 3 new quotes which have responses, or 2 or 1. So just
Personally, I think that would be good. I don't know how my team
okay.
feels about that. But.
Oh, okay. Okay. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, so you can move on.
Okay, yeah. What dates are usually tracked and you feel are important for example, submitting a quote or quote closure date where you have input some dates?
So Dwayne, what he's trying to ask is,
Mm-hmm.
there are certain dates or milestones which are kind of important. Like you spoke about it, that there are some expected dates which we can't modify as of now, and that is a feature which is already there in the system. But what are such dates or milestones which are usually tracked? Is it when the quote is submitted, or it needs to be awarded, or approved? So what are these certain instances which are kind of tracked closely by you and your team?
Um, uh, mm, for the
So,
I'm thinking of 2 different milestones. One is for me personally, and one for the actual quote
right.
portal. For me personally, it's when I receive the request from the engineer. Now, my goal is to try to get those in as quickly as possible. But again, it depends on my workload. Sometimes I may not be able to do that until like the next day. But what? So that's my personal milestone. I guess for the actual module, the milestone would be initiating the quote request, the bid request to the vendor.
Right.
And then the second milestone would be receipt of that quote. And then the next milestone would be either awarding or rejecting it. So in the actual module, I think that there's only 3 milestones.
Right.
Those 3.
Right. So, would it help you and your team if, say, coming closer to these milestones, say, a couple of days before that, or sometime, you kind of again, once you log into the application, you get some alert or notification that, hey, now we have 2 days left for this, or just kind of a note there or something, which would help you know, okay, what needs to be tracked.
I think it would have, Michelle, because
Okay.
every time I go in SACON, it's not necessarily to check on quotes. I might go in there to check inventory, or go in there to actual issue an order, or there can be a number of things while I would go in there. And I may not have that on my mind to actually look at the quotes. So if I get a notice that says, new quote arrival, then that would direct me toward that part of the application.
Sure.
So in essence, it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, that would kind of help you. And making sure it's not intrusive or it's not stopping your work. Maybe if you happen to go and click on quotes, then you get that. Not necessary, it's always there popping up or something.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Sure. Okay. So, yes, Sanju. Okay. So, yeah, Sanju, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. So the next thing that we would like to know is what you feel that the approach for this application should be. Should it be more linear, step-by-step progression, or a sequential while creating a quotation?
So, Dwayne, how this works is right now we create requisitions in a particular part of the application, and it's generated, and then you convert it into a quote, and then move to the quotes module where you kind of manage it, and then you have to kind of go ahead, review it, ask questions, get responses. So, would it be helpful if somewhere this process becomes stepwise and much more intuitive, in the sense you just go stepwise and do one aspect of the quote and wait for it to come back? Uh, did you kind of would you prefer something like that in the
Well,
module?
I'm trying to think of an example as you're asking your question. The, uh, in any way you could make it simpler and the,
Right.
minimizing the steps. Because right now, personally, it's it's kind of like it's kind of like intense in a way, in that there are a lot of steps involved. It's very
Right. A
a
lot of
lot of
data to be added.
time would be involved. Yeah.
Right.
And the steps are kind of intimidating because you don't know if you press a button. Like, for instance, verification. You don't know if you press. I pressed verification before at a time that I shouldn't have done it, and so I've locked myself out of the ability to do some edits. And so in those cases, I've had to start all over again. And so it's I guess I don't really know how to answer that question except to say making it simpler, less time consuming would be the best direction to go in.
Yeah. So Dwayne, would you like it if the system probably helps you out and tells you what you need to do next, rather than you figuring out or trying to do that? If there's a system, or if there's a flow which tells you, okay, this is what you do now, next you do this, and the natural flow, how it's going, and where to come in. So would something like that help you out?
Yeah, Vishal, I think that would be excellent, especially for my team and I are somewhat quote unquote seasoned on this, relatively speaking, when you compare us to the engineers. So I think that would be something helpful, not only for us, but especially for the engineers. Because right now, we refer to the manual or the guide whenever we go through areas that we're unsure of. So yeah, I think that would be helpful.
That would be helpful. Sure. Okay, we'll take a note of that.
And I don't know if the engineers would necessarily do that.
Yes. Yeah.
I
We
think they'll
probably need
call us,
something
or
simpler. Yeah.
I think they'll call us, or they'll just completely opt out of it and ask us to do it.
Yeah. So you think there has to be something very minimal, or just very simpler for the engineers, for them to select maybe what they do generally, just some fields which are technical or something, which
For,
are not too much for them. Would that help?
for us too.
Yeah.
For us too.
Get the data you want.
Yeah, it's a lot of different stages involved in getting the quote out.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that completely. Okay, Sanjog, you can go ahead.
Okay. So, do you think while adding services for any specific order, some format needs to be followed? For example, there are some data points which are more often used, like services, costs, or any other configuration. while creating this codes?
Mm, that sounds good in concept, but I can't think of an example. So
Okay.
I'm not really sure how to answer that.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Probably, but I can't
Hmm.
think of a specific
Right.
example.
Okay. Sure. No. No worries. Uh, so coming to the next question. There are certain questions which are added to services, uh, which needs to be asked to vendors of, some more detailed insights from the vendors regarding the code. So do you think this is being utilized, this particular aspect, asking questions through the tool, or whether it's offline? And if it is asked, then is it asked uh, during creation of those services, or how is that, how are those questions being kind of addressed by you and your team?
I'm not sure if I'm qualified to answer that because I don't know
Okay.
the
Okay.
the
The
face of
codes
the
part of it.
application the engineers, the
Okay.
vendors see.
Okay. 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 Sure. uh, so do you actually communicate with vendors? Are there instances where you had to do, or it's more or less purely engineers who are doing that?
I'm the middle person. I'm the
Okay.
one who
Okay.
has actually a daily well, at least a weekly, sometimes a daily interaction with the vendors, and I
Oh.
talk with the vendors on behalf of the engineers.
Okay.
Every now and then I'll pull the engineers in if there are details that I'm unsure of. Then and
Mm-hmm.
it's a point of kind of disclaimer liability. I want to be sure that the engineer and the vendor, excuse me, understand each other. But in most cases, I am the go-between.
Okay. Okay. Right. Right. Okay. Thanks. Yes, Sanjog, you can ask.
Okay. So currently, do you feel that the filters are important to have? For example, filtering the data by vendors or by specific uh, uh, categories that you would like to have.
Specific categories.
So what we're trying to ask is, in case you're mining some data, or you want to find out certain codes or requisitions, and you're looking at certain services only or certain vendors, do you have to kind of search that a lot, or how much effort do you put in finding certain data? Uh, will it be easier for you to just choose a particular, say, this service or this bandwidth and this, and you get a set of records which you can check?
Yeah, so Dwayne, I
Oh,
don't want to lead your answer, but like when you log in, when you go into the quote module and you pull up that big table and it says there are 60 quotes outstanding, and yours are in there plus all your teammates, how do you find your item and what could help you find
oh,
it quicker?
okay. I
I
haven't
think that's,
experienced that yet.
oh, okay.
I haven't experienced that one yet, Mike.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
because usually, I mean, it helps that my name is next to my quotes, so I can focus in. I can go straight to my quotes and then just look at them. So I've never gone through a list or had to
Okay,
screen my quotes out of a list.
okay, okay, sure.
But thanks. I appreciate everyone trying to bring it down to the granular level so that I could understand how to answer it.
Right,
I
right.
really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, yes, no worries, no worries. So, so in general, Dwayne, when working with the application or whenever you're actually communicating with engineers or completing your task, do you feel certain aspects? You already mentioned that certain aspects could be easier or lot less data to be added. Do you have any other feedback for us, like anything you would want to change or make it simpler for you?
No, no, not really. I mean, I get the goal, and it's great that everything is centralized to the
Hmm.
point of it being easy to access things and recognized. As far as the quote information, the inventory, the orders, all of them are now housed in the same
Hmm.
warehouse, if you will. And so that makes it a lot easier to create reports or to check on trends or things of that nature. But uh, it's just that the quote module, since it's kind of like in its embryo stage, it's so new. Um, I think that the newness of it is intimidating, and then which of course a lot of new things, because you
Yes,
don't
yes.
understand. But then also the fact that it's meticulous is kind of intimidating too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if simplicity can be massaged into that model a little bit more, I think
Right.
that a lot of people would
Mm.
accept it more.
Right. So you
I
would,
don't know if that makes any sense,
it
Mike
makes a lot of
or
sense.
Michelle or.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it kind of reflects how you work, and your opinion generally is really helpful. So, what we assume is you would like something which guides you and helps you in your actual work, then to
Hmm.
search for certain things, and little
Yeah,
simpler and less data heavy, which you would
right.
like, and just few fields which are very useful and you can work with them completely. And if you require, then you go ahead and add more
Right.
specifications. Sure,
Y- Yeah,
sure.
that's correct. Thanks for that summary. Because in essence, you have to understand our perspective and the
Yes.
competition or the
Mm,
comparison that this model has with, um, and the
mm,
comparison is with the way we used to do it is was manually, but
right.
basically we would take the information from the engineers and we would put it on a form and
Mm,
then submit that to the vendor. And
mm,
that process would take like maybe about a half an hour or so, a half an
mm,
hour, maybe an hour if you had to go back and forth with the engineer to make sure the form was filled out properly. And then we would send that, we would basically send a statement to the vendor telling them that we'd like uh, bid or quote on this particular service in 1, 2, and 3 year terms.
right.
But now we have to go into the module and we have
Right.
to. It's kind of like creating from scratch something,
Mm,
and it takes much longer than that to do it.
right. Right.
So
So you
that's the
would, yeah.
comparison.
So you would rather have something which you are doing replicated here, or probably somehow integrated, which is probably not more than a 3 step or 4 step process and straightforward linear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I know there's no going back, and so and I respect and appreciate the leadership of Mary on this, and I again I understand the ultimate goal, and so whatever is decided on as far as the improving on the product, I would appreciate. I'm sure that other users would appreciate because
Mm,
it's kind of like any application, even an application on your phone, it needs to be user friendly, and it needs to
yes.
be simple, and it needs to reach your goal in a more efficient and effective way than before. And so
Right.
those are really the only three goals. Uh, that I think should be focused on, regardless of how you get to that point.
So Dwayne, I just to
Right.
make sure I understood you, you're saying you were in a manual process before, which
Hmm.
took you 30 minutes to an hour, depending upon complexity and and getting stuff squared away. But now you think it takes longer than that using the quote module?
Yeah, I think it does, and
Okay.
and even if it doesn't, Mike, it's the perception that it does because of the complexity of it sometimes, and that you know it's like the previous system that we used. Initially, it seems complex and it's intimidating because you're unfamiliar with it. But I think as time goes by, it'll become more of my second nature to work with it.
Right.
But along those lines, as it progresses, I'm hoping that it can be made easier to work with too.
Okay. Nope.
Right.
Fair enough.
Got that.
But as far as timing, I mean, I could as a personal favor to you, I could time myself next time I go through that and try to do something to try to get an idea of it, a rough idea of how long it takes.
Yeah. If you
Yeah.
could, I think that would be great. Not,
Mm.
I mean, I don't need to hear 40 minutes and 38 seconds, but if you come back and say, hey, I spent I spent 2 hours and I got 3 quotes in, that's kind of, oh, okay,
Okay.
right. That's taking me approximately 40 minutes a quote. Yeah,
Yeah.
ballpark is fine, I guess is what I'm trying to tell you.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Mm.
don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because last time I did one, I think I mentioned earlier it was last week. I think it was last Friday, and I went through the process, and then I did a verification ahead of prematurely, and so I had to start over again. And so that added, of course, to the time, but also to the frustration.
Right.
And so
Out
yeah,
of,
so that happens.
out of curiosity, I've heard you mention start over a couple times. What
Hmm.
types of things are causing you to start over?
Not being able to go back and make changes.
Okay, so
So,
editing fields. Okay.
hmm yeah. And let me think a little bit. What is it I couldn't change? There was something I couldn't change. I couldn't go back. And so it would be nice if sometimes we could go back to make some changes on some things. Because it's kind of like at a certain point in the module, it becomes a one-way street. So,
Gotcha. Right. You got to drive all the way
and
around the
so
block to
you
get
got
back
it
to the
right,
house you
exactly.
missed. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Gotcha.
at that point, you stop. You say, oh, and then you go take a break. You go get some coffee, or
Yeah.
you go walk around outside, or yeah.
I did have 2 questions for you, and I'm just
Hmm.
asking from
Sure.
your point of view, because I know you can't
Okay.
speak for the team.
Yeah.
But so within the quote module, we have those RFI questions.
Hmm.
Have you used those, or do you ever see a need to use those? Or do you not understand it enough to even guess? Because I realize I'm asking you to guess.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see. The RFI questions. For example, like what?
Well,
What
so
does that
one
mean?
of the capabilities that we added to the quote module is that you can go in and ask the vendors a series of questions, right? You could ask a question about last mile provider. You could ask questions around SLAs. You could ask questions around what account this is being billed to, right? We gave you the flexibility to ask questions to the vendor, and then have your vendors respond to those questions, and then you could grade those responses.
Okay.
But
I'm sorry. I haven't used that feature.
Oh, okay, that's fine. And that's
Okay.
I went in and looked at your quotes, and I saw none of it hadn't been used. So I was just curious if you ever saw a need for that, or if that's part of this complexity and intimidation that maybe if we hid that, it might simplify things.
Yeah, just on the surface, it sounds like a good feature to have, but I just haven't used it.
Okay.
Hmm. And what was the second question you had, Mike?
One of the capabilities within the requisition.
Hmm.
So like you said, I mean, ideally the engineer is creating that, but sometimes you go in and do it on their, you do it because the engineer didn't do it. And it's just
Right,
easier and more productive for you to do that. One of the
right.
capabilities is to take that and you can either go to quote or you could go direct to an order. I was just wondering if you ever have gone direct to an order.
No, not yet.
Okay, so that's
Yeah, I've seen that feature, but yeah, I've never used it or have not used it yet.
okay.
And I guess it's a good feature to have. I mean, if the engineer, well, yeah, yeah, if the engineer wants to know how much something will cost, and then, but they know they want the service, but they just want to know how much it costs. And yeah, I suppose we would get a quote,
All right.
and then it can go directly to an order.
Well, that's what
But yeah,
I'm thinking. Some of what you have said, and not just you, but your colleagues as well. It's like, well, maybe we envisioned like an engineer coming to you, like, and maybe we took a complex case, like we're turning up a new site, and this
hmm,
site's going to need internet access. It's going to need voice services. It's going to need, POTS lines, for the alarm and for the elevator and all that fun stuff. And it was
yeah,
like you would go, okay, I don't need to go for quote for these, so I'll just take these and send them right to an order. But this internet service, I need to go out and get a quote, so I'll take that through the quote process.
right,
But it,
yeah.
but it, but which brought a lot of complexity. But and maybe that's part of the overkill, and that's what I was just curious.
Well, prior to SACON, only examples I could think of is like if an engineer said, okay, we want to we want to upgrade this circuit to 1 gig. We want to go with this vendor since they already have facilities in place. So just get us a price, and then we'll get a price, and then they're ready to order once they find out how much the monthly recurring charge would be.
Who checks that the facilities are in place? Is that the engineer or is that you guys?
It's normally the engineer, but it could be either, because the engineers should know what the inventory is for all the different sites.
Oh,
So
it's your site, so you know what's there.
right. Hmm.
Would they ever? Do you ever go to sites that you don't know and you would like to go out and look at a system and say who has fiber running into this location?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
Oh,
that happens.
okay, and that's the engineer typically does that.
The engineer, and sometimes we work with the vendor on that too.
Okay.
Um, it's it's on being on both sides of the fence. It's good if our inventory is intact and trued up. We should know what we have in all of our facilities. Um, but if so, like I always try to check internally first before going to the vendor. Because I know, since I was on that side before, I know that when the customer comes to me, a lot of times if the customer would come to me to ask me what they have at a certain place, I'm kind of thinking to myself, you guys should already know what's in your what's
Right.
in your facility. But
Right.
that doesn't happen all the time, especially for large corporations, because they lose track, or someone may not keep records properly or whatever. So, um, but yeah. but Mike, and I'd like to say, feel free to come to me anytime and I can give you my perspective on to help you maybe understand some things a little bit better, or in a different way of how we do things. I mean, I'm open. I like working with you guys, with your company. That you have a good team. So any way that I can help to make your job easier, I'll be glad to. If I have the time to, I'll be glad to help out or talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
My
We feel
pleasure.
the same way. We value Dell. We see you as, one of our platinum customers, and are going to help bring the product to, the next, an evolutionary step in the process. So.
Well, thank you. I don't know if my answers have been helpful. And in fact, I didn't know if I should have studied ahead of time or not.
No.
No, Dwayne, they were very useful. In fact, they were very helpful for us because we gauge, what we kind of understand what is the expectation, and things could be simpler, and that's how it is. I mean, focus should be on your actual task rather than how to get there. So yeah, it's very valuable. Thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Sure.
And there is something that I did run into, Mike, that's not related to the quote module per se. And
Okay.
I had it open on my window, and maybe I'll run this through Mary first, and just trying to respect the hierarchy. But I had it open yesterday, and then my computer overnight, it updated, and so it's not on my screen anymore. But it's a difficulty that I ran into in doing a search for it was a search for an invoice, I think. And the invoice didn't have the circuit ID on it. And so right before the call, I was scrambling to try to find that email. So if I find it, what I should just share that with Mary? Or
Please,
maybe I should.
please. Yeah, I just need to. I mean, I think however you feel most comfortable. I mean, you could send it to me and CC Mary, or send it to
Okay.
Mary and just ask her to work it with us.
Okay.
Either whatever way you feel comfortable with.
And maybe I'll just kind of work with it myself for a little bit too, to just make sure that I haven't missed anything before seeking help.
Okay.
But yeah, it was something that I couldn't. That it kind of like it wasn't. My initial thought was that it wasn't an easy, that there weren't the right categories there for me to do a clean search of it. So it's kind of like I felt like I had to cross-check to try to find that particular record in our inventory.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
So just what I hearing you say is like you knew a circuit, you were looking for an invoice, you put it in the global search, and you were surprised that you didn't find the invoice. So now you're having to go back and figure out other things to look for to find the associated invoice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And so if I find that, then I'll do what you suggested.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. I would be interested in that. Again, it probably should go through Mary and let her look at it, and then because she could route that either to me or to Anne or to someone else. So that's the only challenge there.
Sure. Yeah, and it's not a sense of frustration or anything like that. It's just a curiosity.
Okay. Well, those are good.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I thank you very much, Dwayne. I wish you a good rest of your day today on Friday. I hope you can enjoy this great
Thank you.
Texas weather we're going to have this weekend, and stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you. The same
Thank
to
you.
all of you. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Dwayne.
Nice,
Have a nice
nice
day.
meeting you all. Nice working
Yes.
with you.
Yeah.
Same here.
Same here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mike.
Mike.
Thanks, everyone.
welcome.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.